that needs to be an open conversation. What is your risk tolerance? Am I looking at good, better, best? Or am I looking at worst to good or best to unrealistic? I've got to understand how I'm advising you on the benchmark in order to help you. I don't know which risk I'm helping you mitigate right now.
Great question, because there's legal risk, there's reputational risk. I mean, here's kind of, now let's kind of pop it back into employment if you don't mind. Because what I always remind people now is the emerging workforce has a very different tolerance for poor behaviors in a workplace. So if an emerging employee joins a company that, and I will use film and TV, for example, for Kristen's point, I spent 10 years working for most of the major Hollywood studios. And so, yes, when things went wrong, it did hit the news. And there's a lot of famous people that just didn't behave properly. But at the end of the day, film and TV production was always traditionally known as this magical forest where no one could enter, right? And it was just, well, you've seen the stuff that goes down, right? It was not the most welcoming of any workplace. That is changing, but it takes time. And so as the new workforce emerges and goes onto sound stages and sees some of the legacy things that still kind of happened, there's zero tolerance for that, right? And they're going to bring that up, and it's kind of changing how things work. But there's also zero tolerance for the way that companies respond. And so what I always tell people is, okay, here's what's going on. At the end of the day, the situation that was complained about, the person they complained about, the right way to educate, not punish, to Christian's point, is to do X, Y, Z. It's not a terminable offense. But what I will tell you is the emerging workforce, if they complain about something, they expect that person to be gone. That's just an expectation that we all have to manage. It's just a thing that is part of the everyday life now in HR compliance and employment law, right? And the challenge that you run, and the example that I will provide, and it's a very public example, so I'm not saying anything out of school, is if you look at the Ellen Show. The Ellen Show was a very, very popular talk show, right? It was the worst kept secret in Hollywood that it wasn't the most friendly set, okay? Things came up, people complained about the environment, and the emerging workforce did not feel that it was appropriately dealt with. What happened? Went to BuzzFeed. The minute it went to BuzzFeed, one season later, the show came down. So what I like to always, to Kristen's point of what type of risk are we talking about? Well, there might not be massive legal risk in a situation like an Ellen scenario, because in California, even though abusive conduct is protected by law, it's this funky, weird definition that no one's ever going to meet. So is anyone really going to be successful on a bullying, abusive conduct, lawsuit? I mean, yes, but that's probably even not in the Ellen situation. The reputational risk is the problem. The minute it goes, so social media is the great equalizer, right? For many things, definitely for employees. If they're not happy about what's going down, they're going to take to social media. And the best example I always provide is Ellen. Even Jimmy Fallon, back in my days at NBC, I was the HR leader for the Fallon show. And some things came out about him, not quite as impactful as Ellen, but it was impactful. And so I think it's a great point to raise, which is, what type of risk are we talking about? Is it company reputational risk? Is it legal risk? Is it both? It could be risk too, where you're going to lose some type of, in the employment world, you lose exemptions, right? If you don't classify people properly, if you have independent contractors that really should be employees, that's a risk too. So it's a great question for someone to always educate and tell you there's several different types of risks here, and kind of, and give you their, to your point, their litmus test. I use, like, listen, red flashing light here. You don't want to do that. That's kind of how I provide it. But you have to think of all of them. There's a lot.